mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about episodes 3 and 4 of Hulu's Mic, entitled, Lover and Meal Ticket. Anytime I have two episode titles, I tend to always forget one of them, and I have to look over at my notes to remind myself. But Lover primarily focuses on Mike's relationship with Robin Givens, and Meal Ticket focuses on not just the idea that people in his life are kind of bleeding him dry and using him up for his money and leaving him, but also the fact that people warn him of this. People tell him about this, and for reasons that I'll discuss throughout this video, he doesn't really listen. So I thought the episodes were fine. I'm not particularly blown away by the show as a whole, but the actors on this show are doing a lot of heavy lifting. They're all doing an incredibly great job. Trevante Rhodes, again, as Mike Tyson, is incredible. You know, there's a lot of shit going around on like Twitter and shit, and they're fucking with the show, taking like this screen grab of the worst fucking shot of Trevante Rhodes as Mike Tyson, be like, this is the fucking version of Mike Tyson that's on Hulu. And it's like, okay, yes, admittedly, the way he looks as an older person with the face tattoo and all that kind of shit doesn't look good. It looks like an old 50 Cent. I get it. But like, he looks great throughout the whole rest of this thing. So like, and then like his performance is so good. Like, it's not even just the voice and the lisp and the things that you kind of come to expect, because I feel like imitating Mike Tyson is something that so many people have done in a deriding fashion, but there's so many people have done or tried a Mike Tyson imitation that a lot of people could probably pull it off and sound a lot like him. It's the inflections, the faces that he makes, just I think really the inflection is the best way of putting it. But he sounds like Mike Tyson. He talks the way Mike Tyson talks, and I don't just mean the voice. I mean like the way he like pauses in between words, the way he might emphasize certain words, or how he kind of sounds kind of goofy at times. Because Mike Tyson does generally seem like kind of a fun guy a lot of the time. And he's doing such a great job in this role. I'm telling you, if you close your eyes, you think it's Mike Tyson. You know, we got Harvey Keitel last week. I was completely glowing over that appearance. And then this week, we got Russell. I'm looking at my notes to get the names. We got Russell Hornsby in action as Don King, and Laura Harrier as Robin Givens. And Laura Harrier, you guys probably would remember as Liz in Spider-Man Homecoming. I think she appears in what was the second one called? I don't know, Going to Prom. I can't remember what the fuck the second one was called for some reason. Homecoming, because they all got the same theme. I don't know, man. That's crazy. I can't. Oh, wait. It's coming back to me. Nope, it's gone. All right. But talking about the show itself, right? When you get past the acting performances, I feel like the show isn't doing enough to elevate the material. You know, we're talking about a guy who is one of the most brutal, savage fighters of all time, and an incredibly interesting just character. You know, this is a guy who, you know, you look at him as, you know, this brutal killer in the ring, but this is the same guy who has this love for pigeons. This is the same guy who does the fucking Mike Tyson mystery show, which ironically I believe you can also find on Hulu. You know, this is a guy who's taking goofy roles like in The Hangover. This is a guy who now has a thriving weed business. Like, this is a complex, robust, you know, just diverse kind of character. And I think that when you have a guy like Mike Tyson and you want to tell this story, I think you kind of do it a disservice when you lean too heavily into the humor. You know, I think the show kind of takes me out of the show a little bit when he breaks the fourth wall, looks into the camera, and like drops a one-liner. Like, you know, like the way I just described Mike Tyson, like one of the scariest, like that was like his tagline, scariest man alive or some shit like that. Like one of the scariest guys that have ever walked this fucking earth. A guy who clearly is brilliant in a way, but also just, you could tell he's not altogether there. So it's like you can't ever really trust that like he won't snap on you the next minute. Dealing with somebody like that, don't remind me of fucking like Zach Morris and Saved by the Bell by having him break the fourth wall and talk to me and make jokes. Like, it kind of takes me out of it. And like, that's not what I'm here for. Now, there might be people who are loving that aspect of it, but I think for me, it lessens the impact of this story, and it doesn't do much to elevate it above all of these other rip from the headline kind of shows, like the, Dope Sick or The Dropout. What's the other, We Bang, whichever one was about We Work. All of those shows I think are kind of missing something, and they're just. I think I kind of feel like to a degree they don't take the material seriously enough. And again, to be clear, I haven't seen Dope Sick, so I can't say that that's for sure what happens there. But I feel like they kind of don't take the material quite seriously enough. Like, there were times where I'm watching The Dropout and I'm like, are they fucking with me right now? Like, is this supposed to be like, I can't tell how I'm supposed to be interpreting this. And I think that stops them from really elevating. And I think in this case, it's the humor, I think, that really throws me off, where it tries too much with the jokes. It tries too much with looking in the camera and breaking the fourth wall. And that kind of stuff takes me out of it. And we need less of that and more scenes like the one we get in episode 3 at Customato's house. But I'm going to talk about episode 3 and 4, but I'm going to start with episode 3. But before I actually get into 3 specifically, I do want to point out something that I think is we are meant to take away from this show, not just these 2 episodes. It's very prevalent in these 2 episodes, but we're meant to take away from this show as a whole, is that as scary of a guy as Mike Tyson is, this is a guy who I think very clearly yearns for the affection of others. Not just the attention, but he wants to be loved. He wants to be admired. He wants to be looked at as somebody who's, important. He wants to find a potential someone. Not, I don't want to say he wants to find a father figure, because I don't think that he's seeking a father figure. But I think this is a guy who is subconsciously looking for someone to fill that father figure void. And I think that makes him a lot more susceptible to things that he probably would want to avoid. So talking about episode 3, he claims to love Robin Givens, but he's like fucking every woman in sight, including the ones that he is buying gifts for Robin from. And I think the wildest one is he's having the phone conversation where they make things official, like, you're my girlfriend now. And he's like getting head from somebody else during this conversation. And I think, again, like, on the surface, you might look at that as like, wow, Mike Tyson was a womanizer. But I looked at that as, this is a guy who, if you are willing to give him attention or make him feel valuable or loved or important, and if you're Mike Tyson, there's going to be a lot of women willing to do that, he's going to be willing to take it. So I think it's less of he's just a piece of shit, which is what I think Mike Tyson might say about himself. I think it's less that he's a piece of shit and he's somebody who, not having a father around, is always looking for outside admiration and affection and attention. And in this case, in episode 3, he gets that from a lot of women. And in episode 4, he gets it from Don King. But we'll talk about that when we get there. And speaking of which, I kind of feel like, Mike, the actual real Mike Tyson, has been, I guess, speaking out against this show, because I guess Hulu doesn't have his permission. They didn't consult him, and he's not supporting it. And I gotta feel like he's not gonna like episode 3 if he watches it. I doubt he even watches it, but if he does, I doubt he's gonna like episode 3. Spends a whole lot of time on him being a womanizer, treating Robin Givens like shit. And think about and they show this interview in I think episode 1 or 2. Well, I know it's in 1 or 2. I don't remember which one it is. But that interview where the one guy brought up his rape charge, and it's the whole thing like, I feel bad talking to a rat piece of shit like you. Like that interview, like, I feel like that's how Mike Tyson would still respond to this dramatization of his womanizing. Even if it's an accurate portrayal, I still feel like he's gonna look like, why y'all gotta bring that shit up? But another example of this too that I thought was kind of funny is when we meet Robin Givens, he's even talking about potentially marrying her in the future. Not even, and mind you, this is when we meet Robin Givens as the viewers. He hasn't met her yet. He's just seeing her on TV talking about he's gonna marry her one day while he's fucking somebody else. Like it's funny, but like I said, at the same time, it really does speak to how he values and seeks out the attention and admiration and adoration of others, particularly women. There's a great scene at Customato's house, which I mentioned earlier. Mike goes over there, Robin, her mom, which I wasn't the kid, like, was her mom like the third wheel on all their dates for years? Like, that's kind of crazy. Robin starts kind of attacking Customato's wife, asking her, why does Mike pay for this house? Like, oh, I guess he's like family. That explains why my husband is putting his life on the line to pay for your house. Like, way out of line, Robin is in this moment. But she may have a point. And I remember watching the scene originally. I say originally like I've seen it 18 times. I've only seen it the once. But after the scene was over, I reflected on it. When it was watching, I thought, man, Robin is way out of line here. And I continue to think that, and I do still believe that. But I do wonder if Customato was using Mike Tyson. And there might be some of you who are far closer to Mike Tyson's life history than I am. So maybe you could speak to this a little bit more clearly, with a little bit more information. But I wonder if Cuss was using Mike to a degree for the fame. I believe this was a guy who was kind of like on his way out. Had his best days were behind him, I think, prior to discovering Mike Tyson. And I don't necessarily think it's implausible that Cuss was using Mike Tyson, because at least for me, I've only heard about Customato and Mike Tyson's relationship from Mike Tyson. So if Mike Tyson is someone who's inclined to not see when someone's using him, he's going to go out and talk about how great Customato is and how all these things that he's done for him, and might not consider that he's being used. And maybe there were all kinds of people in Mike's ear telling him that Customato was using him. I don't know. I've always thought that they did have a father-son relationship. But when I thought about it after that scene, I'm like, I've only heard that from Mike Tyson. So if he's delusional, I don't want to say delusional in case he watches this. I don't want to say delusional. But, if he was someone who was inclined to not see that, particularly at that time, he would come out and be like, yeah, this guy's like a father to me. He saved me, So I do wonder if there is a little bit of truth to what the Robin Givens character was saying on this show, because I don't know if Robin Givens said that in real life. And speaking of which, I love Laura Harrier. They did a great job of making her look like Robin Givens, particularly making her look like Robin Givens at that time. So really great stuff there. And then I want to end like my brief thoughts about episode 3 with, I really thought this was a great quote, and I think it speaks to Mike Tyson's mindset, and I think it add a little bit of context to a lot of his behavior that we've seen throughout the course of his life post-fighting. And it's after he reacts to Robin talking about Cuss and their relationship, and it goes too far, and I'm actually gonna talk about it going too far and when I talk about episode 4 next. But he says, I don't know how to fight to lose, only to win. And I think that's a very interesting quote. I think it's a great quote, but I think it's insightful in that it helps us understand how he thinks. The idea of I don't know how to fight to lose, like, I don't know, it's tough to word why I think that quote speaks so much to his personality and how he thinks, because I feel like no one else would think that, because who would think fight to lose? But like, that's how he thinks. Like, I don't know, he's only to win. Everybody fights to win. Nobody fights to lose. But the fact that he really thinks about that, I think speaks to who he is. I just thought it was a really interesting quote. In episode 4, this guy sees a lot of loss, period, in his life. In these 4 episodes, a lot of people close to him have died. The one friend, Customato, in this episode, his mother and his sister die. As a guy, he experienced a lot of loss at a young age. And I think, again, that's going to provide a little bit more context to the guy that he ended up being. Don King steps in this episode as both kind of like a father figure and a mentor and a manager, of course, to Mike. And Mike says in that one-man show portion where he's got the suit on, he's older, and he's got the tattoo, he says that trusting Don King and not training for the Buster Douglas fight were his biggest mistakes. And I think that's interesting that Mike Tyson at that age looks back on his time with Don King and goes, I fucked up. But again, if one of you people who are way closer to Mike Tyson's life than I am want to speak on it, I've never heard him say that about Cus D'Amato. Like, I don't think there was ever any amount of insight or clarity that Mike Tyson got that made him go, yeah, Cus was using me. I've only heard him speak highly of Cus D'Amato, but moving on. So his sister Denise, who he calls Niecy, and who the captions don't know how to spell Niecy because white captions don't know how black people talk and spell stuff. Like it was spelled as if it was spelled like Denise with a Y on the end and without the DE. So Nisey was how they spelled it, and I'm like, that's not how we spell Niecy. Come on, captions. But she warns him about Don King, just as Robin did in the previous episode about Cus's family. And he responds both times by taking it too far. And again, interesting aspect of his personality. That when he feels something that, and I think it's him feeling that there's some truth to the accusation, he responds by taking it too far. He tells his sister, "I make more money in a day than you do in a year. You must dream about having my life," or something to that effect. And then he tells Robin, he calls Robin a bitch. He punches a hole in a door or a wall or some shit. I don't know. But he overreacts. I don't even want to necessarily say he overreacts, but he takes it too far. And I think taking it too far, it is an overreaction, but I just feel like taking it too far is kind of like a hallmark of his life. Like that. This is how you define Mike Tyson. He just takes it too far. But while living this lavish life with Don King and partying it up, and he's got all the women. I think, man, we saw more naked women in these two episodes than we didn't see any in the first two, so we definitely saw more than we did the first two. But having sex, 6, 7, 8 women in his room at one time, he doesn't properly prepare for the Buster Douglas fight, and he suffers his first loss, which still to this day is one of the biggest upsets in boxing history. I remember watching that fight. I was young at the time, and we had it wasn't Comcast cable yet. It was Barton, I think was the name of it. And I think even back then, only Mike Tyson pay-per-views were mad expensive. Like right now in 2022, ESPN raised the cost of UFC pay-per-views to $75. They were, I think, 70, I think, before that, maybe 65 before that. And that's kind of, I feel like, the standard for like pay-per-view fights. 75 is the high end. If I remember correctly, I feel like Mike Tyson pay-per-views were $50 in 1990. Like those things were expensive to be ordering them and not watch. And that was one of the first ones that we got. I was always asking my parents to watch Mike Tyson fights. And I remember there was one that the first one we got, it was one where he knocked somebody out and, in the first round after a few seconds. It's like, man, we paid $50 and sat through these other fucking fights to see this motherfucker fight for 45 seconds. But I'm off on a tangent. But I do want to talk about this one last thing before I wrap this one up. This is going a little bit longer than I expected. The fight scenes, if you could call them that, I think they leave a lot to be desired here. But I feel like they're playing way too much into the stylistic aspect, and I feel like the show would be better served if it had played it to a more realistic aspect. Like if I felt like I was watching an actual fight, I'd be way more into that. But they go out of their way to remind you that this is dramatized. Like in the fight with Buster Douglas, there's like 4 or 5 like slow motion and lips go flying and that overused corny shit. They do it like 4 or 5 times in that one fight. And like that's unnecessary. Like what's the point of that other than like this'll look cool? Like that's not necessary. Like I don't need to see his lips flapping to know he got hit hard. Like the dramatized fights are not working for me. Like, just make it look real, man. Like, I don't need all that extracurricular shit. So, wrapping this one up, again, I feel like the acting performances are really doing a lot of heavy lifting here and carrying the show. I do think, though, that there's a lot of interesting stuff to be said and to be learned about who Mike Tyson is, but also how he became that way. I just feel like they're they're diluting the impact by having these overly stylized fights with the slow motion lip wiggling shit, with the breaking of the fourth wall, crack these one-liners into the camera. Like man, if they just got rid of that, got rid of the fucking jokes, and not even got rid of the jokes, but got rid of the specifically looking into the camera and dropping these one-liners. Got rid of that shit so you could stop taking me out of it. Make the fight look more realistic. I'm talking as if they can make these changes now. The show is what it is. But, make the fights look more realistic. I'd have been way more, I'd be way more on board with this show than I am. I do enjoy it though. It is a fun watch, but again, it's because of the actors. They're doing such an incredible job. So there's 8 episodes total. They've released 2 in these first 2 weeks, so I think it's safe to assume that we have 2 more weeks of episodes. So I will see you guys next week for episodes 5 and 6, and the following week for episodes 7 and 8. And real quick before I wrap up, 2 things. 1, shout out to my patrons. I tried to do it at the top of the video, but I forgot, and I remembered in the middle, and I was like, I'll put it at the end. So shout out to my patrons, Delvin Cox and Brett Factual, and Rings of Power. I will be watching Rings of Power in 45 minutes, and I will have a video up reviewing in a non-spoilery fashion the first 2 episodes of Rings of Power at some point tomorrow, Friday, September 2nd. I would guess early afternoon, probably. So if you're still here watching now, be prepared for that tomorrow. I will see you then, or I will see you next week. Peace.